do you consider yourself to be a native New Yorker or a native Connecticut? What do you call people?
Connecticut.
Oh my God.
That's real. Connecticut. Isn't that sick? Like what? Who's ever going to say that?
Yeah.
It nearly sounds like a slur. And I'm just like.
First I got your voicemail, then I got you. We can meet in person or maybe on Zoom. So tell me what's your genre, tell me what do you do? I'd like to know the things that specifically make you.
Hey, I'm Tim Barnes. You are the genre. And in every episode of this show, I ask a great new guest about the first genre that inspired them, the first craft that they pursued, and how they feel about that first pursuit now. Of course, I do this because I believe that those three lines of questioning help guide you towards the things that you want to be doing and why you want to be doing them. And I ask myself those three questions every single day. This episode, I'm talking to podcaster and podcast producer, Anita Flores. As of the release of this podcast episode, Anita works as a podcast producer at Marvel Entertainment. And previously, she's worked at SiriusXM, producing Earwolf and Stitcher shows. And she also hosts and produced for Latino USA, her own I'm Listening, a Frasier podcast, Care Talkers, and Dr. Horror, which explores why scary movies are comforting for some. It's a thrill ride of a conversation, so buckle up and enjoy. You ever get nervous, like it's especially online when you're recording? I think there is something off about the dynamic when you're looking at people's expressions on the computer screen.
For sure. And actually, if anything, I'm purposefully like, I usually do this during recordings. I'm doing it right now. I'm not looking at myself. I like moved the box, so now I can only look at you. This is the closest I can get to reality, I think, if I'm not constantly looking at my own facial expressions.
Yeah. Well, I realized that I wanted to interview you. Was it a couple weeks now? Time is very strange. But you had a birthday party that was not your actual birthday party.
It's true. It was a week after my actual birthday. But who cares? That's what I say. Just have fun is how I think about my birthdays.
And I feel like your decision to do that told me that you are someone who has figured the bulk of your life out and likes to strategize and have a plan. Is that true?
Wow. That is, yes, I guess so. I mean, I think I love to have a plan. Do I think I have the perfect plan? No. But sometimes I'll tell other people my plans and then they're like, that's like a pretty good plan. but then I'm like, is it? So yeah, but yes, I do. You are correct. I do. I love to plan. I daydream a lot. And I think I have a pretty good plan, but I have bigger dreams. I'm always dreaming.
Okay.
I tell people to keep dreaming, honestly.
Honestly, like I don't know if you have an interest in politics, but that was a great answer. that was like open-ended in a way where like anything's possible. And you gave me a glimmer of hope. And that's all we want from our elected officials, I feel. Well,
I did work as a video producer at a Democratic super PAC in 2018. So maybe it rubbed off on me, potentially.
And the other thing about this birthday party that wasn't your actual birthday party was that it was a bit of a full circle moment because a year ago, perhaps, something like that.
So it was actually, believe it or not, this year, the longest year ever, I think, in good ways and bad ways, mostly good. Yeah, but I got laid off in February of 2024. It is currently 2024. And then I got hired at a full-time job as of like 1 week ago. So it was about a 9-month period of time between the full circle moment, which was that I follow you on Twitter or we follow each other. I'm a fan of your tweets. And, you know, I then had a moment at my local bar when I had drinks after I got laid off and my colleagues hosted a night for me of like, you got laid off, this sucks. And then one of those colleagues knows you. And then I saw him talking to you, But I was all the way at the end of the table at this bar. And then you ended up taking a photo at my request, but like you didn't hear me request it. You heard it through the person we both know saying, yes, this person who just got laid off for some reason wants a photo of this night captured. Because even though it was like obviously a bummer to get laid off, I made some really special connections and friendships at this job. And a lot of the people that night who were there had also been laid off the previous year. So, you know, like war buddies, I would say.
Yeah, yeah.
And then I decided 9 months in, found out we have more mutual friends in common. Yeah, I'll say it on mic. I saw you walking in my neighborhood with someone else that I recently met. For some reason, did not say hello, and then told someone else that we're both friends with that I saw you, but I didn't say anything. And then I thought, you must live in my neighborhood or in the surrounding area. So then I thought, I'm going to invite Tim to drinks that I am celebrating because I got a full-time job. We did that. It was great. And a friend at that, this is for your listeners, I guess, because you were there, but a friend of mine took a photo on his Polaroid camera of you, me, and another friend. It's on my fridge right now.
That's amazing. That's amazing. And it was a full circle moment, full of surprises, because I had no idea that I took that photo of you. I just took a photo, and then a few weeks later, while you were searching for work, you posted that image and told the world that I took that photo. And I was like, wow, this is absolutely insane. But I feel like that moment of you being surrounded by coworkers says a lot about you, that you bring community back to you being a great politician and working for that Democratic super PAC. You bring people together. You know, you work, being in your orbit is being part of the big tent that is the best parts of America. Yes. And that's why I give you my endorsement for whatever your job is right now.
Thank you so much. I do love community, and I actually found out that I can't go to a friend's like wedding celebration, and I am selfishly sad that I can't go because her words am the reason that she got together with her partner. Wow. And so the fact that I'm not going to get to be there and get credit for this with all of her loved ones around, that's a bummer, because as you just said, I do love bringing people together, and it gives me probably too much joy. And I'm like, is it even to a selfish degree that if I'm the reason somebody falls in love or meets somebody because I happen to be there or somehow arranged it in a cosmic way, I want to be there and experience that and feel like I am partially responsible for someone's happiness. Like, it feels great. It's really a wonderful feeling if you haven't felt it.
Yeah. And now I think the heart of why I'm excited to talk to you is because we have a lot of similarities in what we do. And I feel like in order to go through the 3 questions of this podcast, I need to get a solid understanding of how you define yourself now. I think our similarities are that we both are podcast producers / comedians, and now I add things like TV writer on top of that. How do you define yourself mostly, or do you even feel like that's necessary?
If you asked me this question maybe 3 years ago, I think I would have had a harder time answering and probably wouldn't have given myself a defining, I don't know, like role in my head. But I would say I feel very confident that I am, a podcaster is honestly a big part of my identity at this point, like professionally and in my personal life, that I podcast about a lot of stuff. Like, I mean, I work in podcasting as a producer professionally. Since 2018, I've hosted podcasts about things that matter to me, including caregiving. I did a podcast about being a long-distance caregiver for my dad who has dementia. I did that. I host a podcast about the show Frasier because I love the show Frasier. Sometimes I host a podcast about horror movies because I love horror. And I did a narrative story for Latino USA about kind of my relationship to learning Spanish over trips to going to Peru. So I actually recently, I had a catch up with a former colleague, and we both kind of came to the conclusion that both of us process lots of our feelings specifically through the podcast medium. So I do feel that it's also a cathartic medium. So yeah, I would say like, yeah, podcaster now. But 3 years ago or before, I'd say like, I love storytelling. Sometimes I do stand up. I'm also a video producer. And I've had a million jobs, which is true. I have had many, many jobs.
We all
that
have.
have nothing to do with podcasting or video. Yeah.
Well, I feel like especially the fact that you love Frasier, that must be some sort of through line into what you're doing now. Frasier, a man who works in an audio medium, you get to filter everything going on in your life through an audio medium. I don't want to assume that Frasier is somehow connected to the first genre that inspired you in your youth, but is there anything else about, Frasier and you being a podcaster? And is Frasier connected to the first genre that inspired you when you were a kid?
Oh, great question. So I feel like there's two answers to that first question about genre that inspired me, because by default, television was and still is a huge part of my life, like watching it. And so I guess it's TV, because originally my answer for you today was going to actually be horror movies. But then I realized that first horror movie that sticks out to me was on TV. I was watching, because I didn't grow up with cable, so that's also a defining thing about me.
Same. Yeah.
Yeah, it really defines the kind of TV. And, people have definitely, or I've decided that I am elderly coded based on all kinds of therapy speak and TikToks, that I feel like a lot of the shows, including Frasier, Seinfeld, like PBS, it was like I watched these things because that's what came in on my mom's black and white TV. So yeah. So I would say it's TV. And the first horror movie I connected to was at my grandma's house. She had cable, and that was thrilling.
Same. Yeah,
Oh
going to my
God.
grandma's house for cable, and then having that experience of like the extra rarity of like watching Nickelodeon or cable,
Yes.
whatever, made it feel so special.
It's so special. And I definitely have memories of what are the things I, for whatever reason, remember watching there. The big things I remember watching, Gilligan's Island
Yeah.
and Hellraiser.
Wow.
And I think it's because when my grandma came in, the time I was watching Hellraiser, I kept changing it to Nick at Night because that was a safe channel. Who's gonna, no, it's okay for me to watch Nick at Night. That's fine. Also, age-defining moment that at some point, I don't know if Nick at Night still exists anymore, but at some point, somewhere, I flipped it on in the last 10 years, and the show Friends was on there.
Yeah.
And that really made me feel like time had passed. That I had gone from watching Gilligan's Island, the shows of my perhaps parents and grandparents, to now Friends.
I learned the fact that Friends is on Nick at Night in a very strange full circle moment where I was working at the reboot of All That at Nickelodeon, talking to very competent young human beings who were born the year that I graduated high school, who were on the who were on the show.
Ooh, that
And I was like, oh wow, yeah, time really starts to move fast and shift.
Yeah. Well, I didn't know I was going to have this answer, but it is television.
It is
I know,
television,
and I
okay.
know that's a big answer, but there's like very specific, like, I'm happy to tell you what they are. There's like shows that I still think about and still talk about to this day that have bonded me with my mom, like The Twilight Zone is a big one. That's the show I watched with my mom, and it's why I know it's why I am now very into The Twilight Zone. At some point, I got Paramount Plus because it had The Twilight Zone.
Yeah.
That's the number one reason I've
Not
got
even
it in
Frasier. Not even the fact that
well, because Frasier moved.
Oh, okay.
Frasier's moved around the streaming apps.
Got it.
Originally, I think it could have been Netflix. But it was not always on Paramount. So I followed it. And then, of course, then now it's on. I had to keep Paramount Plus. And I'm doing no commercials, which is incredible. Oh my gosh. But yeah, Frasier, also soap operas, specifically NBC soap operas, Days of Our Lives, Passions. Passions is a huge influence on me. It's a very strange show. Oh my gosh. Passions is a soap opera that wasn't even on for that long. in like the 00s, I believe. And it's a supernatural soap opera that takes place in a fictional town. And it's like on top of kind of a Buffy adjacent, if you know the show Buffy the Vampire Slayer. It's like sitting on some sort of entryway to hell, I think. And there's like a witch who lives next to this family, who's like one of the people in the family is like a good witch, but the witch, there's like a bad witch named Tabitha.
Well, you know what's crazy is in this household, we're watching Once Upon a Time for the first time, basically. You know what that show is? It was on ABC about a magic town. And then I'm thinking about WandaVision. Now I'm starting to think all of these are just ripoffs of Passions.
That would be incredible if some of today and that ABC show's most successful shows were because somebody watched the show Passions. Passions is crazy. You can find, if you just look up Passions, like NBC clips. And I'll say one more thing. Tabitha, this character, next door has a doll that she brought to life. So and played by a real person. But it's a wacky duo, these two. Talking doll and Tabitha the Witch. Anyway, I would say there's some kooky, that I feel like has informed my sense of humor. Some of that weird TV, the Golden Girls. I love the Golden Girls. TV. Nice. Number one genre.
Where did you grow up?
So I was born and lived from age 0 to 7 in Queens, New York. But then from like 7 to 17, I lived in West Hartford, Connecticut. And that was because my mom's family lives in West Hartford, Connecticut. And my parents just like could not afford to live here anymore with a kid. So I did move to Connecticut, lived in a suburb for about 10 years. And like, apparently really did not like it.
Wait, what do you mean apparently? Like, have you blocked some of these memories?
Well, I think I did a one-woman show about the fact that I went to 4 different colleges and eventually graduated from Brooklyn College in Brooklyn. But it took a lot of moving around between New England and eventually New York by myself to realize that from my personal experience, I did not enjoy the experience of growing up not particularly literally wealthy in a suburb. And I'm sure not all suburbs are like this, but I would say in this particular suburb in Connecticut, I felt a particular snobbiness, and I made a decision all on my own to come to New York. You know, I was a psych major at the first 2 colleges I went to in Massachusetts and then the University of Connecticut. And then I'm trying to remember what happened, but essentially I had like a moment in a film class realizing that I did not want to be in psychology, but I wanted to do something in like film and TV. And so that's why I dropped out of my second college and did end up going to school for screenwriting, which is interesting because I'm definitely and have never been a professional screenwriter, but I do write now, like for work, like in audio.
Yeah.
I do. So anyway, so yes. So I went from New York, Connecticut back to New York. And now I've been in New York since like 2007. Yeah, it's been a minute.
I get the feeling, just from the names of these places, that these are very white spaces.
Yes, extremely. Very, very much. And so that's why I very passionately, I don't know how I'm not going to, if I have a kid, how am I going to not make them do the opposite of what I say, where I'm like, you know, very expensive 4-year institutions, not always necessary, and sometimes a waste of money.
Yeah.
And I love a city school. Like CUNY has my heart. And to this day, and I graduated, like 2011, it's 2024. There are still people from Brooklyn College that are right now are my best friends. And most of those people are native New Yorkers. And it's the opposite of my upbringing in terms of the people that I was friends with. The level of diversity here is completely different compared to the nearly zero amount of diversity that I experience living in a suburb in Connecticut. And I go back sometimes. My dad lives in Hartford in an assisted living facility, but that is also, feel free to cut me off, but it's like night and day going from Hartford to West Hartford. Hartford is the capital of Connecticut. And it's like, it's the same stuff here too. Honestly, you go from one neighborhood to the next, and because, you know, there's more white people living here than, yeah, they have a CVS, but my dad doesn't have a CVS anymore because they got rid of it. Probably because it's a poorer community, which is BS. Anyway, I love New York, and I love that people do not shame you for not having a car here, which I really love. I think that's amazing. And that also, no matter what, I think it's a special thing that brings people together, that people don't care who you are here. I actually like that. And I know some people don't like that about New York. But,
I mean, what is an example of like caring about who? Oh, are you talking about just like ethnicity, that kind of thing?
Well, no, honestly, I was thinking more like, I'm not famous, but I like that famous people. I like hearing famous people say things like, people don't care about who I am in New York, which is true.
Oh, yeah.
People don't care if you are, in my opinion. I've definitely seen very famous people walking around.
Yeah.
As recently as last week, I saw several celebrities in Brooklyn Heights.
No, for real. And I've been asking people, have you seen an uptick in celebrities on the train? I've seen so many celebrities
Can
on
we
the
name
train
drop
lately.
here?
I mean, I saw Lily Allen and her, I always forget the name of her husband.
Oh, David Harbour.
Yeah,
I love celebrity culture. Don't get me started.
I just looked up from my phone on the train and I saw them. I was like, oh, wow. The other day I saw Chris Rock walk into a coffee shop and out within like a minute. So I don't know what was going on. Maybe.
Okay, you've already topped me, but I saw last week in Brooklyn Heights, one after another, the guy from the Bleachers, I forgot his name, Jack Antonoff, Margaret Qualley, who's currently starring in a horror movie I like, The Substance, and BJ Novak. And what an exciting time. And then I looked up all the celebrities that live in Brooklyn Heights. There's a few. Yeah. I've gotten us off track, I feel. This is also very common for me to
No, this is fine. This is fine. And I'm trying to find a through line, thinking about television, thinking about the way that you describe your life. It feels like flipping through channels.
Oh,
and I don't know if you consider it that way, but you've had a lot of different, I feel like there's different versions of yourself in all these different spaces. And you're talking a lot about, loving New York, loving, native New Yorkers. And it makes me want to ask, do you consider yourself to be a native New Yorker or a native Connecticut? What do you call people?
Connecticut.
Oh, my God.
That's real. Connecticut. Isn't that sick? Like, what? Who's ever going to say that?
Yeah.
It nearly sounds like a slur. And I'm just like... So absolutely.
Do you feel defined locationally? I'm someone who does not actually feel defined locationally, and I take pride in that in some ways, but I obviously have a little bit of jealousy for like people who are like, oh yeah, when I wear this Lakers shirt, it means so much. Yeah.
Great question. And again, I would answer that question differently up until like lockdown. I had a lot of time to think during early lockdown. We all did. And now I can comfortably feel I can say, I consider myself a New Yorker. Absolutely, I do. Because now I've really spent I was born in New York, but as time goes on, it's insane that as I get older, I'm like, formative years absolutely defined by living in a suburb. And there are parts of that experience that I honestly am grateful for, the biggest ones being just aimlessly wandering around. I don't know if kids can even do that anymore. I don't know if kids are allowed to wander around malls anymore. And in my case, it was like, I wasn't wandering that far. I had two best friends that also, like myself, happened to be only children that lived within walking distance of me. Nobody could drive. We were just walking around, going to the same 4 places. And I am grateful for that because I think it forced me to have a very active imagination. I feel like, and I wasn't doing after school activities. You know what I was doing? I was watching a lot of TV.
I am exactly
the
same. and just an example of how much I identify with this. I grew up in South Central LA. I wasn't really allowed to go outside, but on the flip side of that, I didn't really want to go outside. So I watched a lot of TV. And then around my last year of middle school, we moved to, I guess you could call it a suburb in Riverside, California, a few hours away. And it was a totally different sort of vibe. And for the, coming of age, wandering around the Super Walmart and things like that.
Super Walmart. That sounds like an amusement park. That's wild.
But it kind of fractured a part of my brain a little bit, a part of how I defined myself. I feel like life was one way in the heart of LA, a different way here. And when family would visit from LA and whatnot, there's just this strange differences that would pop up. And I don't know what the through line is just yet. But thinking about television in your life, it seems like the black and white TV, assuming it had a flickering light bulb in the back, this was
swinging.
This was a vortex that was connecting you to your grandparents, your parents, like multiple ethnicities, or I'm not sure, but your everything is being filtered through this device as a point of connection.
Absolutely, yeah. And I mean, I think what is interesting that has drastically changed for me is my dad is from Lima, Peru. My mom is a white Russian Jewish woman from Connecticut. And I honestly didn't truly have exposure to my father's side, that family, almost until we went to Peru for my first time when I was 19. And before that, it was going to visit my grandparents, my father's parents in Miami. And I would go there pretty frequently, like in the summers, but I wasn't really speaking Spanish. So that has come to me later in life. And now I have a nice relationship with family in Lima, where actually my husband and I are taking my dad to Lima for Christmas.
Oh, that's amazing.
And I never really celebrated Christmas. I actually celebrated like Jewish holidays because my mom's side of the family is who I grew up near around. And that sense of humor absolutely is a big defining part of me as well. Like my sense of humor is very much informed by growing up around anxious Jewish people, 100%. But is now then, of course, been mixed in with this wonderful, and I love my mom. I will say, there is some dysfunction. I will say that. I'm sitting on a gold mine here, and that is, I don't know if we'll get into it, but I do feel like I envy people like David Sedaris who can write about their family, and I don't know what it's done to the communication with his family.
Yeah.
And I don't know if you can relate to this either, but I'm like, damn, I'm sitting on some good stuff, some good crazy stories. Like I wrote, when I was a screenwriting major, I wrote my feature-length screenplay was inspired by this movie, War of the Roses. It's Kathleen Turner and Michael Douglas. They are, I think, in the midst of a divorce, and their lawyer is played by Danny DeVito. And the story of basically, I can't fully remember, I think they end up killing each other. And Danny DeVito, the divorce lawyer, tells the story of this happening and how things led to where they led. So inspired by that, I wrote a semi-autobiographical screenplay, because my parents are divorced. Thankfully, like friends, but they are divorced. They both have obsessive compulsive disorder, and both had truly competing OCD that drove the other one insane.
Oh, boy.
Which super fun to grow up around. I mean, fortunately, they got divorced when I was 12. Thank goodness. I'm one of those kids that was psyched when your parents get divorced. But anyway, I wrote a screenplay that was two people that have OCD that are driving each other crazy. And I remember I felt very weird about writing that screenplay. And was it a good idea? And there's a person from that class who is my friend to this day, who I remember back then in 2008 was your screenplay was good. And I was like, it was? I don't know. I feel like I was oversharing, or it was bad. I don't remember why I brought this up, Tim. That happens to me a lot.
That happens to me a lot too. That's very interesting. I feel like I want to ask, do you feel that you have OCD as well?
No, I would say OCD tendencies, and I would say of all the, because there is honestly a lot of mental illness on my mom's side of the family, I would say fortunately, the biggest thing that's rubbed off on me is just anxiety, like generalized anxiety, but absolutely like, I would say nothing debilitating. And weirdly, I would say the anxiety has absolutely fueled my creativity and is probably why I tend to work on a lot of stuff. I just, at night, I've actually gotten into puzzles because I do often have this urge to like do something creative or write something or like record something. And then at night, that makes it hard to like, wind down. And looking at my phone is bad, I think. So I have gotten into puzzles recently because it feels like there's like a little reward. Like I like to do things where it feels like there's like a little gift at the end. And I don't know if you've ever done a puzzle. This is new to me. It can be really fun. Thrilling, in fact. To like get it fits, the piece fits. It's exciting.
It is really exciting, yeah. Don't scroll away. You Are the Genre. We'll be right back after the break. Here we are in the middle of the episode where I remind you that You Are the Genre is an independently produced and listener-supported podcast. You're probably wondering, how can I lend you some of that support? There are 3 ways. You can just leave a nice rating and review on the podcast wherever you're listening to it. Those kinds of things really help. I know you always hear podcasters tell you, but it really does. Give it 5 stars. Write something nice. It helps the algorithm do whatever it does. There's a wizard who controls it in Emerald City. And you can also support the podcast by subscribing to the newsletter associated with it. You can find a link to it in the show notes or at youarethegenre.com. You can subscribe for free as an easy way to get consistent updates on the podcast. But if you upgrade to a paid subscription, you get advanced episodes, unedited, before they come out all shiny and new for the public ear. And beyond me trying to get you to support the show, I typically use this break to highlight something that I've simply been enjoying, as a reminder that we all should take a moment to think about the things that we're enjoying each week. This time around, it's the movie Beetlejuice, the sequel to the film Beetlejuice, originally directed by Tim Burton and currently directed by Tim Burton. I loved this movie. I just watched a screener for it yesterday. And it's reminded me that, oh yeah, Tim Burton is his own genre, undeniably. But not only that, he is one of our finest comedy directors. And I'm saying that because in addition to watching Beetlejuice, a couple days prior to that, I rewatched Edward Scissorhands. And I hadn't watched that in a long time. And it just dawned on me, this is a comedy. For some reason, in my youth, I thought it was just a straight up horror. But no, it's a big concept, but functionally, it's just a bunch of amazing gags. So there you have it. Consider watching Beetlejuice. Leave a nice rating and review on the podcast, and subscribe to the You Are the Genre newsletter. If you have interest in that last thing, get all of the information you need at youarethegenre.com. Now, back to the episode. Where were we? What you're describing, this fear or anxiety around writing something that depicts elements of your family, I think that's why I tend to write comedy leaning towards the absurd, because that kind of puts a fog over the realities of it, or like genre things. Because then you can, like, it's very easy, or it's easier to tackle something in your family if you like make it something about aliens, or instead something in the real world, a real sort of conflict, but you make it about, elves and orcs or something instead.
I love that. I wish I had more of honestly, that does make it seem a little bit like you're not necessarily exposing everyone's personal traumas. I do have an idea though. I because this also happens to me a lot. I have ideas all the time, and executing them is the hardest part. But coming up with ideas is probably why I love like working in development. That was some of my favorite things I've done, at previous jobs as a podcast producer, was like helping people develop their ideas and coming up with, so like I have dreamed of writing a screenplay, but the thought of writing it, ooh, nightmare. I'm like,
well, that's the
what?
thing. I mean, that is the puzzle part, actually, though.
As in, it's a puzzle, kind of puzzle,
and it's exciting when you start to put the pieces together. It's challenging to put the pieces together, but that's where the excitement lies at the same time.
I have this much figured out, which is, I would love, I'm very close with my dad, and he used to be before he like started really going into decline, I would put him in videos. Like I used to work at Univision at Flama, which was like a comedy channel aimed at like Latine millennials. And I would put him in stuff and people would be like, your dad is so funny. He's so cute. And I started making videos with him actually after he was diagnosed with dementia. It was actually my husband's idea, who's my boyfriend at the time, because I was like, oh, you know, this is to me, such a undignified disease that takes everything away, all the great things about you piece by piece. And he said, why don't you start like recording stuff with him, like crazy stories he's told you. So I started recording stuff with him and I started just throwing scenarios at him and I was like, what would you do if we like encountered like the mob or something? Like, and he was like, I'd kill him with kindness. I'd give them a hug or something. It was so cute. And so then I was like, oh, what would happen if my dad and I were like in a buddy comedy and we were like, to give you an example of like now movies and like things that I love, like I love the show Somebody Somewhere that's on HBO Max with Bridget Everett. I love the movie Little Miss Sunshine. Have you seen Little Miss Sunshine?
Oh, yeah.
Little Miss Sunshine is, I love that movie. I love, my favorite movie this year of 2024 is Problemista with Julio Torres, which was a very surrealist movie about the immigrant experience and also hustle culture that I deeply related to. But I want to make a movie that's a cross between those two things. That's something that is deeply earnest, but also very funny and probably weirdly inappropriate at times because my sense of humor has gotten a lot darker, I would say, in the 10 years since I've become a caregiver. But I was like casting it in my head. I love casting. I'm like, how do I get into casting? Because I was like, okay, I need Bobby Cannavale to play a mobster. And then in the assisted living facility in this movie, I want Yalitza Aparicio, who was in the movie Roma that came out a long, long time ago. Not that long ago. Carmen Christopher, who's a comedian, and Ex Mayo, who's also a comedian. And that stuff is so much easier for me than to write the structure of like a story. Oh, yeah. That takes some work.
It takes work.
You must know you do it.
Yes, it takes work, but I've learned to enjoy the work element of it.
I love that.
So it's better than a lot of other kinds of work, I feel like. And I feel like so this rising dark humor that you have that probably has some lines of connection to your love of horror movies, even though we're talking about television primarily. I want to get to, you have all these goals, these things that you're doing. You're studying to be a screenwriter. It sounds like maybe while doing that, you learned that you don't like, figuring out the middle.
It's so hard. I should also mention I was a TV minor.
TV minor, okay.
So I was a film major TV minor. And I met some of my best friends in something called a TV club. And those are people in that club that are still my friends. And what a time we had, because the TV department and the film department were on separate ends of campus and definitely had a beef. The film kids thought that the TV kids were lazy. And the TV kids thought the film kids were pretentious. And in ways, they were both right. I saw both. But
it's funny, there's versions of that with every art form, I feel like. It's like people who write in pulp magazines versus people who write novels, people who, you know what I mean? There's so much value in both. And some of the best art are people who have the dual influences.
Yeah. And so a lot of the creative work that I really liked doing happened in TV club because we had a TV studio in the basement of the TV building. And so in this TV club that I was in with friends still to this day, we kind of did like our own version of The Daily Show, but it was just about the news at Brooklyn College. And it was very silly. And so I think that was it wasn't like, me, of course I have secondhand bitterness. I always will, of kids that went to NYU, especially that were part of Tisch, because, I'd say I did a pretty good job of getting myself into the places that I wanted to get into based on connections that I made, not based on the school that I went to.
So you're very goal oriented, and it feels like you're constantly checking off some box.
That's right.
Using things as stepping stones to get to some ultimate place.
There's so many. There's lots of stepping stones. There's too many to count, honestly. But I don't remember where I was going with this, but I think that TV Club is funny. I really didn't even put it together until we were talking about this and you asked me about genre, because no one had ever asked me my genre. TV truly has followed me everywhere. And now, well, I don't know. We'll see.
Well, it's because as a device, it is, the television is multiple genres.
Yeah.
But it still has a limited form. I think that's why both of us loved it. And how do you feel about TV now? Well, whatever we're calling TV. What we're calling TV now isn't TV.
It is. It's tough. It's bumming me out because like there's lots of TV that I love watching, and what I think I am not loving is seeing the trend of the only shows I feel like at this point that have more than like 10 episodes are Abbott Elementary, and thank goodness for Abbott Elementary, which gives me hope. But other than Abbott Elementary, it's a lot of procedurals.
Yeah.
Like, and I'll give them a shot. Like, I watched the premiere of 911's latest episode because it was about a bee NATO. Because 911 is a procedural about like the people that answer the call at 911. And the season premiere this season was the big emergency, a tornado of bees, like destroying Los Angeles.
But how do you know about this? Or are you watching this on actual, like at the time slot? Or
Oh, no, okay. Not at all.
Yeah.
I'm seeing random ads on buses, billboards. It's the reason I watched several episodes of Dr. Odyssey, which, you know what? That gives me hope too, because that movie, as Lauren Milberger, who is a podcaster who has a great podcast about Murphy Brown called, I think it's called FYI, a Murphy Brown podcast. She said Dr. Odyssey is a cross between The Love Boat and House. And it's true, starring Pacey from Dawson's Creek, aka Joshua Jackson. My biggest issue with TV right now is I feel like people are making one season of a show or maybe two, and then that's it.
Yeah.
And that really bums me out. Hey, I have a whole podcast about Frasier right now, and I'm talking every week about all the plot holes and things that are missing and lack of character development, because this was a show that was 22 episodes a season that is now in this revival 10 episodes a season with almost all new characters. It's not working for me. I mean it's working for me in a sense. Yes, it is. But I wish that there were 22 episodes.
One show that I think works well and luckily has like, it feels like it's coming out so consecutively. Like I forget like how many seasons of Only Murders in the Building have there been, but it works so well because it feels like a mystery novel that you pick up that and they'll keep making another one with the same characters. So it fits kind of the style of the show. But a key to that is the consistency with which the seasons come out. I feel like every time a season comes out, we're told, oh, they're working on the next season already. So that makes me feel good as I'm going into it.
Yeah, that sounds kind of normal. Like, what's not normal to me? I loved Severance. I just saw the trailer for season 2, which comes out in 2025, and the first season came out in 2022. That's crazy.
That's a huge time jump, and so much catching up to do with your life once you realize how much time has gone by between a season.
And I just want to give a shout out. There are 2 shows that I think about frequently that got canceled because I guess not enough people were watching them. This Fool, which was a show with Chris Estrada and Frankie Quinones. I loved that show.
Same.
It particularly for me as someone who I feel like, you know, I talked about this at the Super PAC. The spectrum of like Latinidad is very large and very complicated, and it's why trying to appeal to everyone as one voting block, that's not working. It's not going to work. It's currently not working. And I feel like I loved This Fool because it hit 2 things for me. So did Problemista, where it's like, yes, I do care and want to hear about identity, but I need to feel connected to it. And both that show and the movie Problemista were weird.
Yes.
And I am weird and I love weird shit. And I thought that I just had never seen a show like this before. It was weird. I loved it. So I'm really sad that that show didn't get a third season. And I loved this show called Made for Love with Christina, what is it? Christina, it's the actress who's currently in The Penguin, which is a show that I have not watched. She was also in How I Met Your Mother. I'm looking her.
She's a great actress.
You can cut this out. Anyway, Made for Love was so good. Did you ever see Made for Love?
No.
Oh my gosh, it was such a weird premise. That Christina Milioti, that was poking fun at sort of what's happening in the space of like Google and like kind of dystopian-esque vibes of like, you know, where is Meta headed and things like that. Yeah. So that was like a weird, Patty Harrison was in there. I love seeing an alt comedian in the mix. The first time that I've ever been sexually attracted to Ray Romano, who in that show is still like grieving the death of his wife, and is now dating a sex doll. It's a great show.
Yeah.
Anyway, so that's the shout out to the two shows that I am sad got canceled.
And Ray Romano, if we're doing shout outs, Ray Romano is a great actor. And I don't know if you've seen the television version of Get Shorty that he's in, but I thought that was fantastic.
I haven't. Shout out to Ray Romano. You know, everybody loves Raymond. Honestly, like that show, I have feelings of a bit of anger towards, much like Married with Children, because though I do sometimes like a dysfunctional family show, it needs to be a certain kind. If it's rich people, I'm okay with rich people being unhappy and dysfunctional. But if it's like more middle class, I find it depressing. And I'm like, oh, Ray hates his wife, Deborah. And she puts lotion on every night. And now I put lotion on. Okay? What's that saying? Am I in an unhappy marriage? Because I put lotion on because my hands are getting dry? Because I'm getting older?
I find it, I think I'm kind of the opposite. I like seeing middle class frustrations depicted. and now we're turning this into a different podcast, but I just wanted to ask one more question.
Please.
Which in this realm of just like talking about that, just having a regular conversation. Have you seen the documentary Exporting Raymond?
No.
I think it's one of the most important documentaries of all time. It's Phil. Phil? Somebody feed Phil.
Somebody feed Phil. I know exactly what.
What's
Phil
the last name? Phil.
About.
Yeah, the showrunner of Everybody Loves Raymond.
I should know.
He finds out that the network wants to make a Russian version of the show, and he says, "Okay, well, why don't I be involved in that?" So then he tries to showrun or at least be the guiding force of the Russian version of Everybody Loves Raymond. Gosh. And this documentary follows him. And the only other show that's really worked in this way in Russia is The Nanny. And so all the execs and everyone in Russia is trying to turn Everybody Loves Raymond into an over-the-top comedy in that vein. And he's resisting against it. And the whole time he's like, you're Russians. You invented the type of, comedy that I'm trying to make this be. Why are you resisting?
Oh my God.
It's so fantastic.
I'm writing it down. This is a documentary because for some reason, though you said that, I was like, this sounds like a thriller to me. This sounds crazy with Phil. Yeah, I know. Who I am also kind of obsessed with. Like I put him and Judd Apatow in a similar category, which would be a dream of mine, which is just this idea that you are known and very successful in a medium. And then because you have so much money and so much clout that you just go and do another thing. So my example for Phil is that he made a TV show called Somebody Feed Phil. Yeah. And he's not an Anthony Bourdain, but he is a man with a lot of money who made a travel show, which is like, nothing would make me happier than to host and not have to do any real work, but just the fun of, in my mind, though I'm sure it's actually really hard to work on, a traveling food show. Oh my God. That would be amazing.
Exporting Raymond was probably the bridge. That's probably the bridge. Like, oh yeah, I can do more things like this. But I want to get back to you, Anita, as we get to the home stretch of the podcast. Yes. Would you say that your pursuit of screenwriting was the first craft that you put an effort into? Like, this is what I want to do. That defined you at a point in your life.
did it define me? I don't know. See, I want to say yes, but like I was a terrible student. Like I truly, like I didn't, I think honestly that did have to do with like perhaps trouble concentrating and anxiety. And yet I feel in my own career, you know what? Would you say in a serious way? Do you want to know what craft I took in a like seriously, or just the first craft that like maybe I didn't necessarily think about if it would pan out or not?
I think the first craft that you didn't know if whether or not it would pan out.
Okay, screenwriting then.
Screenwriting.
Yeah, it was screenwriting.
And then what's the first serious one?
I would say podcasting.
Okay.
Because podcasting started out as a hobby.
Yeah.
Like podcasting was just something in
so
the middle
new.
of
Yeah.
being a video producer, as something I just started doing in my apartment about the show Frasier. Because I was listening to podcasts. I'd like to say early, maybe
Yeah.
before some others. Like the first podcast I remember listening to was actually Stephen Merchant, Ricky Gervais, and Carl Pilkington.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
That was my intro. And then I started listening or illegally downloading episodes of their radio show from like the BBC.
That was such a fun era. Like the
Yes.
iPod was a separate device, and you had to sync it up. You had to connect it to your computer to get everything on it. And then I remember when like suddenly like video podcasts were an element, so you could watch things like that. And then illegally downloading audio was one illegal, but still, I think through that you felt the value of the thing that you were illegally downloading more than you do now when you're paying for an audio streaming service.
Absolutely. It was harder back then because there weren't that many podcasts, whatever year. But as for the screenwriting thing, I think it's really interesting because the more I think about it, the more I think that actually I decided, oh no more screenwriting. But through my entire career, writing has always ended up becoming a part of the work that I do. And I think it's easier for me to think of writing not under the label of screenwriting because I still, I think to this day, I'm still like, that's too hard. That's long. Like, I remember I did that screenplay, the one that I had to do for like my final grade. I got like a C on it. And I remember the note he left me. My teacher was like, I know you did this at the last minute and it shows. And it's like, he was not wrong. So like, even now I think about screenwriting and I'm like, maybe one day I will have enough confidence and like less fear that if I've written all these other things that aren't screenplays, that I can sit down and write a screenplay.
Yeah, is the anxiety focused on the screen element of it alone, like the screen's writing software? Have you written a scripted podcast?
I mean, yeah, like I wouldn't say I've written like, the only time I wrote a fully scripted podcast was when I did a story for Latino USA. And that was an act. That was 3, beginning, middle, and end. But I also was fortunate that I had people that were keeping me in check because I worked with another producer and an editor. And my issue is always that I'm overwriting, always. And so it's nice. And I'm not precious. Like I remember the editor was like, "Wow, you're never like, we can't keep that." Because I'm like, it's too much. Like this should be a good example for you, Tim. Like, I'm always yapping. So like it takes that form in writing too. And I think I'm afraid of, well, I'm a visionary. Is that what you're going to say? Well, I was going to say I'm a visual learner and a social person. I don't know if those two are connected somehow, but I think I definitely have trouble sitting still. I've been great, honestly, in my career. Professionally, I have very good systems in place for like deadlines, like never, like when it's not my own personal project, I always make my deadlines. Then of course there's all the podcasts I have about chat shows. Those are so easy because all I have to do is get on mic and yap. But then when it comes to the more thoughtful stuff, I think I think it might be like a fear of failure, perhaps. It's a lot easier to dream and daydream about like making this like incredible, like a script and then like somehow, I don't even think these things happen anymore, but the daydreams that I have, if I could write them down and like harness them, like they could be good stuff. I have elaborate daydreams, truly. Elaborate.
I've been doing this again. I've remembered just literally like a couple months ago. Like I used to walk around with a notebook, and I guess maybe when I started doing stand up, I was writing joke ideas in there. But even before that, when my goal was to be a filmmaker, I would write random ideas and I would never follow through with any of them. But now that I'm doing that again, and it's stuff that's like an idea for a short story, an idea for a film, an idea for a sitcom, an idea for a joke, it's all in this one little little tiny notebook. And I'm writing. I realized I'm constantly writing. Okay. And I don't know what the end product is going to be, but I do think there's something valuable about at least jotting it down.
I have a number of notebooks, like just that are half filled or random chicken scratch. Sometimes, and I wonder if this would be easier too, because sometimes I tend to overthink when I'm writing, and I'm like, no, that's not grammatically correct. No, that's a bad sentence. However, I can be good on voice memo. Like voice memo is pretty fun for me. I think the issue there is, and I've done this a few times in the last few months, where I've come up with an idea, I've said it, and then I've like transcribed it. But I think, I do think I need a better way to like just write something down in the moment.
And do you think the grammatical thing, because you're writing in a space that's just for you. So the fear is that, is there a little element in your head, and I'm asking this because I resist this as well, where you're thinking about someone looking at this in the future.
Definitely. Because sometimes when I'm writing, I occasionally, yes. Recently I did try and write some stuff down that I thought I might want to do something with in the future. And often I'm writing so fast that it's too quick for my brain. So I'll look back at it and entire words will be missing.
That's great because it's just for you.
Okay.
But I guess I'm asking, like, it sounded like you were describing how you're like, you'll think so much about a misspelled word in the process of writing.
Yes.
But it's like you're worried about some invisible future person looking at this. But one of the best things is that you'll ever look at are little notes that, famous writers would write down for themselves. And it doesn't look polished at all. There are lines connecting the dots between this thing and that thing. It's not all fully put together. Like everyone has this like kind of chicken scratch way of thinking in a way.
Can I access this anywhere? Is there chicken scratch writing of rough drafts of current beloved masterpieces anywhere?
Some of my favorites, and she was a fantastic writer, and her notes look much better than mine. But Octavia Butler's notes are great, and a lot of them are her writing basically mantras to herself, or like saying like, "I will do this because of this." And it's just so compelling or just interesting to read her. Like she's writing down things that she's telling herself and, intentions and things like that. So
interesting. I just wrote Octavia down. Mm-hmm. I've got homework.
Well, the last question, I feel like we kind of answered it already, is like, what is your relationship to that first craft? That first craft in this case being screenwriting. I think you did answer that. And so when it comes to podcasting, and let's just talk a little bit about the future of it. Where do you feel you stand with it now, and how do you think it's evolving?
I would say my relationship with podcasting is definitely evolving. One of the biggest things, and this goes back to screenwriting, is I'm very comfortable in the chat show world. I'm even comfortable doing like narrative stuff for other people. But what I would like to do more of is like that story I did for Latino USA, which was a deeply personal story. That was good. And which is nice that I feel like, I wouldn't always say that about myself, but I'm like, no, that was good. And I got really kind and wonderful feedback from people on this story that really came together. So the future for me, I want it to be more narrative, personal stories from my point of view. I actually have, this is something I've put off, I'd say since I got laid off, that I would like to put a pitch together for This American Life or somewhere that would let me tell this story of me getting my driver's license, because I got my driver's license a year ago. And like that came from a deep place of like shame. I'm very into like the narrative of a late bloomer, as I consider myself a late bloomer for many, many things. But I have all these voice notes of this like journey of like failing the test like 3 times and like finally passing the test. And like, yeah, so the future for me, I think, is going to involve more writing, like narrative writing.
Nice.
But I really need to find a way to like get past this sort of to me, the hardest step, which is the first step of just all the writing. Then after, I'm like, ooh, if something's already there and I just have to like edit it and clean it up, much easier.
Nice.
So I want my future in podcasting to be more narrative and more personal stories, because I've got lots to say and I've got a lot of stories. And I also did my favorite thing that I did. I took, of course, if you're a person who loves comedy and you live in New York, and it's, well, all right, back in 2007, 2008, you take classes at UCB if you can afford them somehow. I took classes, I took sketch writing, I took improv, and I took storytelling. And the one that stuck with me was storytelling. And occasionally I still storytell for the stage. But yeah, I'm very much a storyteller. So more of that.
That's great.
In my podcasting journey.
And you experimented with a lot of things. What got you to start dabbling in stand-up, and have you kind of shaved that part off? Or is it still something that you engage with?
I think the stand-up came more after I had been doing a lot of like moth type things and like, yeah, storytelling shows in New York, and finding that, yes, a comfort spot for me was often like funnier stories. And also I wanted to see if I could handle sort of the harshness of stand-up. And like, honestly, ideally I end up in a Judd Apatow situation where I am beloved for a medium. I write a book or something, or something I do that isn't stand-up, like skyrockets my career to the next level. And then I do a stand-up special. And by that point, people will just love me and like won't care if it's funny or not. That's where I am with stand-up right now. But the people that are really good at it, I mean, I'm such a lover of comedy, and love watching great comedians crush on stage, that I still like. I like to see it. Only once, though. I can't handle, like, I'm also past like seeing people, and understandably they have to keep workshopping over and over, which is something I kind of grew tired of. And I yap too much, honestly, for storytelling. Like, to me, I'm like Mike Birbiglia, best case scenario, Chris Gethard, who are so great at like, yes, comedian, but like storyteller. That's my sweet spot. So traditional stand-up, it's not, I wouldn't say it's something I seek out at this point. 'Cause it's a little too hard for me to put things in a short, succinct way.
Well, this has been a great conversation, and I hope to see you in an episode of the revival of Frasier someday.
I don't even dream of being on Frasier. What I want is to host the like Paley reunion. That's what I want. I don't even, that's my dream. My dream, or also to meet David Hyde Pierce and or like eat dinner with him in his home, and become best friends.
Wow. There's specific layers to that I was not expecting.
Well, yeah. I've daydreamed about
like a
the
restaurant
specifics.
is not okay. It has to be in his home.
Well, I want to see what it looks like. That's sitcom money, okay? They don't get that anymore. And I'm upset for people on Abbott Elementary, because I'm like, I want you all to also get your $20 million you'll have, and you'll be good for the rest of your life. And something tells me it's not like that anymore.
Yeah, it isn't. But this is the Abbott writers are in like the best case scenario for the state of things right now. I feel like, consistent.
Well,
work.
this has been so much fun. Hopefully, this will inspire me to at least bring a little notepad with me, write things down more often.
Yeah, and I like mine because it kind of looks like I'm writing a ticket. You see this? Like this. I take it out. If like, I'm either a
Yes.
detective or I'm like writing a ticket when I stop in the middle of the street to write down an idea.
I want to feel like a detective. Yeah.
Yeah. And I hope this inspires the Paley Center to give you a call. So
Me too.
there you have it. Big thanks to Anita Flores for joining me on the podcast. For more information about Anita, visit anitajutina.weebly.com. And she's Jewish, so that's why I feel comfortable saying that. Freddie Nunez created and sings the You Are the Genre theme song, and Adam Smith produced it. This is Tim Barnes signing off with your weekly reminder that you are the genre.
First I got your voicemail, then I got you. We can meet in person or maybe on Zoom. So tell me what's your genre, tell me what do you do. I'd like to know the things that specifically